Finally, the Steam Deck is now a console. But what do I mean by that? Really what I'm saying is that the Steam Deck, which is already kind of like a games console, it's not exactly like a console in terms of the experience. When you play on a games console, you've got USB ports on the front and you've got the game console just hidden away somewhere. The thing with the Steam Deck is that when you're using it plugged into a monitor, sometimes it's a little bit frustrating if you can't have access to the screen itself. And so that's why it's kind of a frustrating experience sometimes, but the way that I get around it is by using a docking station and having it not too far away. Just a quick disclaimer, Minisopuru did send this unit to me free of charge for the purposes of making this video, but of course, all opinions are my own. So what I like so much about this, the Minisopuru dock, which is ridiculously cheap, supposedly $65, seems to be permanently on sale for something like $22 or even as low as $16 here on the AliExpress site. What's cool about it is the design. The USB ports are on the front of the device. Of course, you've got ports on the back as well. This is the stuff that you don't really need to unplug that often. Power delivery port, so obviously you can power the dock and the console itself. It does work without power. It's also got an Ethernet port here for your wired internet, and you've also got the HDMI port. Now, there's something exciting to talk about this as well because of this special button here, but I'll explain that later. It's got 3 USB 3.0 ports on the front. Now, that is potentially a downside if you prefer to have USB 3.1 or USB 3.2. They are significantly faster than USB 3.0, but in general, when I'm using this, I'm not doing anything that requires high-speed USB. What does really matter to me is being able to access these ports on the front and also just having them separate from over here. When these things are actually plugged in and they've got maybe one USB thing plugged in, power, and they've also got the LAN cable, and they've got HDMI for the monitor, you've got at least 4 to maybe sometimes 7 cables popping out the back. It's just difficult to unplug a cable because it's in between the LAN cable and you're afraid that you're going to unplug something else at the same time. It's just so much easier when the wired controller or your wireless dongle that you've got plugged in is just one thing here on the front. Consoles in the old days used to have all of their controller ports on the front. Once you have them in the dock and all of the cables are on the back, you always have to like turn your device around and kind of fiddle around the back. You're always kind of reaching over. You can't even see really which port. You're not sure if you're unplugging the HDMI or if you're unplugging the LAN cable. Really, just having it on the front is such a simple design change, and yet it really transforms the experience. And in a way, I much prefer this dock to a lot of other docks that maybe have other benefits like USB 3.1. The other aspect that makes this dock really cool is that in addition to being really cheap, if you were going to set up a local event, if you had a bunch of Steam Decks, let's say you got the refurbished cheap model, so you got it for under $400 each, basically you've got these consoles that can run almost any PC game on them. And if you had them on these docks, people could actually plug in their wired controllers 1 and 2 without having to reach around to the back of the dock, which is dangerous because people doing this let's say you're doing like a local event for 4 hours in an evening and you've got like 200 people coming in. They're going to reach around to the back of the dock and they're going to pull out the wrong cable. It's not a bad dock if the USB ports are not on the front. I just really think this is a great feature. The second thing that actually makes this dock really cool is the HDMI button, and it's to switch the connection off without unplugging it. I find this happens to me all the time. There will be a situation where being plugged into the monitor is making various things stop working. For example, when you're on the ROG Ally, this thing will just stop working and I'll need access to the mouse. But as you can see, there is no mouse. And sometimes I'm stuck in like gamepad mode. And so I can't use this as the mouse instead. I need to touch the screen so that I can emulate the mouse. But as you can see, the screen goes off when I'm plugged into a monitor. You can leave it on all the time, but I prefer to like give the screen a rest. Instead of unplugging the monitor so that the screen automatically comes back on this, I've actually just got a button. I don't need to unplug. Again, this is the important part. I don't need to risk other things getting unplugged. I just press this button, it disconnects the HDMI, and then, hey presto, the screen will just go ba-ding. One other weird fringe benefit that I found of the Minisopuru 6-in-1 Steam Deck dock is that Also, the USB ports are a little more reliable than other docks that I've used. On the Gujo dock, I don't know, maybe I need to get like a firmware update or something to fix it. I can't even figure out how to firmware update it if I wanted to. Anyway, wireless dongles seem to bug out, and then I just lose control. They just sort of disconnect and reconnect and disconnect and reconnect. I didn't have that issue with this, so I was quite happy with the reliability of the USB ports. But again, this is the sort of thing that you have to check back on videos like later. It's like a year later, like, is the unit still working as promised? So far, I've been using this actually for like 2 months and it's been fine. I'm also not 100% sure on all of these docks, but something I did try was I plugged in my USB hard disk, my USB SSD into this, plugged this into my Asus ROG Ally, and I did have access to the SSD without power delivery. And one final benefit that people don't really think about too hard when they buy these docks is that because this is not just a Steam Deck dock, this is actually able to supply 100 watts of power to whatever device you're plugged into. So if you've got a 100 watt adapter, it will actually be able to power other devices. I only say this because I've been testing multiple docks, and the ones that are built specifically for the Steam Deck don't work with the ROG Ally. They're just like, you're not supplying me with enough power. I couldn't really figure out what the problem was, even though I had a 65 watt adapter plugged into other docks. They would not supply any more than 45 watts to the unit itself. And it's because some of these docks are only designed for the Steam Deck. They assume you're never going to want to output more than 45 watts, which just seems like a bit of a pointless limitation. Fortunately, with the Minisopuru, this actually has 100 watts of power delivery. Well, it's 100 watts input. So presumably if this thing uses about 10 watts of power itself, it can probably output at least 90 watts. Basically, I'm saying it had no issue with the ROG Ally and on the Steam Deck, and that some other docks that I have been testing don't seem to work with the Ally because it refuses to output more than 45 watts for whatever reason. Anyway, no issues with this, the Minisopuru. Quite happy with that. Well, I've been NihongoGamer. That's all I've got time for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more videos about reviews on things like Steam Deck accessories, be sure to stay subscribed. Leave a comment below. What's your favorite way to plug your consoles into your handhelds into your TV? Let me know. That's all. I'll see you real soon.